So I'm with Bernie here, and we're in Lisnaskea, actually seated next to the Tourism Knows No Borders quilt. And your husband, Bernie, is remembered on here, of course, as well, Patrick. But firstly, could you explain a little bit about who you are, your background, and leading up to the point when you and Patrick would have wed?
Yeah, right. Well, Bernadette, known as Bernie, Morrissey now. I was a Macavinian when I was single. I was actually born not that far from here, near Ballyconnell, but my family moved to Drogheda in the 60s. And funnily enough, that's where I met Paddy. We call him Paddy. He was known as Patrick, Joseph, PJ, all these names, the connotations you get from these Irish people who change names. But anyway, it was in Drogheda where Paddy was a Garda and he was stationed. And I met him in 1962. And we fell in love. We wanted to get married. And we did. But at the time, there was a strange kind of a regulation that a Garda couldn't marry a woman from she had to be 30 miles away from her home in case that she would have an undue influence on the Garda. Now, I don't think that applies now. So the problem was that you could get married and then you could be sent anywhere around the country. You could be sent to the far end of Donegal or the far end of Kerry. Cool. So what Paddy decided to do was to apply to go to Dublin first and get married, and then that we would be already 30 miles away from home. So that's how we ended up living in Dublin and for about 10 years. We bought a house in Santry, but it was never meant to be our permanent home because we always had, well, Paddy had visions of Belturbet, of course, his favourite place on earth. And I was also a cabin person. And so we knew that eventually we would come back down the country. So after 10 years, we moved to Drogheda. And we bought a little cottage with a lovely big garden. And we were very happy there, just on the outskirts of Drogheda. And Paddy got transferred then to Collin, which is about 8 or 10 miles from Drogheda. Mm-hmm. And everything was fine. I had gone back to work. I'm a caterer, or I was, and I hadn't worked for 10 years when we were newly married. And so then I did a return to work course and I decided to go back into catering. And so I was working in a restaurant in Drogheda on that infamous, awful day, the 27th of June, 1985. Paddy was going to RD. He was stationed in, and so that morning he was. I was going out before he was going because he starting work, and he said to me, "Will I leave you down?" It was only a few miles, and there's a bus service anyway. And I said, "No, I'm fine." So I said goodbye to him, and Martin, then our eldest son, was going to RD, and so he was the last of the family who saw Paddy alive. And so I went anyway and got the bus into work. And everything was normal. And about 12:30 or maybe 1 o'clock, my boss came around the counter. I was at the checkout at in the restaurant. And he came round and he put his arms around me and he started to lead me out into the back office. I thought, what's going on here? And when I went in, there were two people I knew very well, our parish priest, Father O'Reilly, and the nun who taught my girls in school, Sister Bosco. And I thought then, I said, "Oh, it's Aideen, is it?" Because I knew they were walking into town that day. And I thought, there's been an accident. And I thought, it's Aideen. And they said, "No." And then I said, "Oh, it's Paddy, he's dead." It just something came over me. And they said, "Yes." So I didn't break down or start crying immediately. I was just totally shocked. I was numbed, I suppose you could say. And then I was brought to the Garda station then. I'd never been in the Garda station before. And I was brought over to the Garda station, and Michael Bohan, he's deceased now, he was the chief superintendent, and he was there, and a number of other Paddy's colleagues. And they brought me upstairs and talked to me for a while, and then I can't remember an awful lot about it, to be honest. I just was told that there had been an armed robbery, and that Paddy was dead. So I asked to be brought to my sister Phyllis and her husband Tom, who lived a few minutes outside of the town, and I was brought there. And then, of course, everything started from there. People calling, and politicians and ministers, and all I could think of was the children, of course, because Brian and Martin were working on a farm. It was the summer holidays. We're working on a farm close by where we lived. And
what ages were they? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Martin was 20, Brian was 17, Mary was 15, and Aideen was nearly 13. So we had 2 boys and 2 girls. And the girls had intended to walk into town, and I knew the boys were working. So then I was told, no, it wasn't any of the children, it was Paddy. And I was brought up to Phyllis's house, and I just don't remember a lot about it then, except that I knew he was dead, and I was told that there was an armed robbery. And the day was just a complete haze, and unreal, really. And my head was just all over the place. I had memories of the past and fears for the future, and worry about the children, and especially the boys, because Martin was 20 and Brian was 17, and I thought, oh my goodness. Then, of course, the priest had to come, and it was unreal. Here was I a few hours after I had said goodbye to Paddy, and here was I then arranging his funeral, and I thought, this is indecent. I can't do this to him. He's only just dead. He's only left the house. But I had to. I found that very, very hard. So then, of course, I had to see if my mother-in-law, Paddy's mother, was still living, and his 2 brothers, one who was in England. And my mother lived nearby as well. And so inquired anyway if they had been told, and they had. And arrangements then had to be made. But I felt afterwards, and I still feel, it was much too quick. Yeah. We should have I should have. Nobody forced me, but it was it just rolled along. But I should have waited another day, at least, to have time. I did go down and sit in the church, and Martin did as well, and the other children as well, after the removal had been, and we sat there on our own. Some of the time we were just on our own with Paddy, but he was gone then. The next day, it was...
You just didn't feel you had any time to process
no
anything?
time, or to say goodbye properly, or to talk things over with him, as it were. Yeah. Anyway, then of course there were all the dignitaries, and it was very good, very nice to see them, and it was a great mark of respect for Paddy. But I just felt it was kind of taken away from us in a way. But it was a great honour to him because he was so highly regarded. And he had been a founder member of the Garda Subaco unit, it's now called the Underwater unit, and also of the Garda Choir. So all these things, the arrangements for the funeral had to be all made, and the Garda Choir were going to sing at his funeral, and it was very poignant. It was beautiful. But it was just so sad.
You felt you were on a roller coaster ride you could not get off?
No.
That was just carried away from you almost?
Yeah, it was. And poor Mrs. Morrissey, Granny Morrissey we called her, Paddy's mother. And she's so quiet and dignified and heartbroken. She was just distraught. Her beautiful son, 49 years of age, and he loved his mother. He was awfully good to her, and she was heartbroken. She really was heartbroken. And I suppose in that sense then we kind of kept one another up, because I didn't want her to see me too upset, and she didn't want, you know, that kind of way. But we were shattered, we were heartbroken, we were devastated. There are no words to describe how we felt.
And Bernie, it was just something that, even though there's a level of risk obviously associated with being a policeman in any country, it wouldn't have been something that you would ever have feared was going to come to your door, was it?
You don't really, although I remember saying to Paddy a few times, if he was late home or something, and I'd say, oh, I was worried. Don't worry, if anything happened to me, you'd be the first to hear. And it was a kind of a joke with him, yeah. No, but I didn't dwell, no. You couldn't, you couldn't do that. Nobody, you could, no. It's too much to think about, yeah.
Bernie, can I take you back as well, just, I suppose, the family, in terms of the family unit you were, as you've said, can you recall any really special times that you shared, and thinking about new birth whenever the children were born, or maybe, in terms of confirmation and first communion and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Do you recall, was he a very hands-on dad? Was he very proud of them? Just to give us a flavour of all of that.
Oh, he was. He was quite strict, but very fair, and they loved him. He taught the girls and the boys swimming and fishing, and we spend our time in Belturbet holidays, and they had great times with them, and they were camping. The boys were camping with him as well, and the only problem was we didn't get enough of it because he was busy, and because he was in charge. At one stage, he was in charge of the Garda Subacqua unit, and whenever there was a fatality or a drowning or anything, he was up in Donegal at the Carriguna when that disaster was, and Loch Mask when there were drownings or whatever, and of course Mountbatten's boat. So he would be gone. He could be gone for weeks on end, and that was the biggest regret. Really, was that he didn't have more time, when he was away so much. But then it was very important, and he was very dedicated. He absolutely loved. He loved to be in the Gardaí, but he also loved the underwater unit. It was himself and a few of the others set it up, and so it was very important to him. But then, because he was away so much, he decided that he would leave the unit and get a station near Drogheda, and that's when he got a station in RD. To be near home, to be with the boys and girls. So that was the irony of that.
And Bernie, you must have been incredibly gifted around your time management, because I'm thinking you four have a family to rear, and also to go back to your work again. It can't have been simple to have carried out all those roles.
No, I suppose it wasn't, but we were young. I was only 22 when I got married. And I had plenty of energy, and we lived just a few miles outside of Drogheda, and I could drive. Well, I didn't learn to drive till I was 30, but Paddy taught me. And it was very handy, and I only realised when he was dead how important and how right he was, that it was so important. So we were busy, but we had a very good life. And then we were near my family, and my brother had a farm, and the boys used to work at it and at another farm up the road, and it was we had a good life, yeah.
Bernie, just then, obviously after the events and what happened that horrible day in June of 85, did you find that your role as a parent changed, that in a sense you had to give guidance from both the part of being a mum and a dad almost? And did you find any of that challenging? Because obviously you'd still had Aideen, who was 13 and coming through a very impressionable time in her life, and the others were still only a few years older than that. So did things change considerably for you around that time?
Oh, it was a huge change. It was because before, when both of us were able to do the looking after, I was worried and think, the two boys are, 20 and 17, and the girls coming on up to that. And these years, everybody kind of worried about the teenage years with their children. And then I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this on my own But I was lucky then that I had my sister lived nearby and her husband. They were very good, and my mother and brother and the rest of the family. They weren't quite as nearby, but they were all very good and a great support. And also the Gardaí and my neighbours. We were very lucky in that sense that we had good support, and we needed it. We did, yeah.
But to have four, you know, I know that, you know, your eldest was 20, but effectively 4 teenagers at that time, that was not a simple thing to have to carry them through with all that they would have been feeling and experiencing around all of that as well.
It was horrific because when the evil that's violence touches your family to that extent, I just thought the whole world was gone mad. And honestly, there was a thunderstorm in the July, plenty of people would remember it, June 85, and then July there came an extremely bad thunderstorm. And the children all came, the 4 of them, big and all they were, came running into my room, and we all sat on the bed, and I kept thinking, wouldn't this be just nice if we just all melted away now, because we're all together. And, you know, I didn't know how I was going to face, but I was lucky because I was brought up by a mother who had great faith. My mother-in-law had great faith. And I used to go around in the day just whispering, Sacred Heart of Jesus, I place my trust in you. And that gave me a little bit of courage to, I had to. You see, you don't have a choice really, Kenny. If you have 4 children, you have to be there for them. And you don't know how you're going to do it, but you just know it has to be done. You have to be strong, and you can't show anger or...
Because you feel that all permeates onto them.
Yeah. And still, if you don't show... You have to show a certain amount, because otherwise they'll think, well, did it not matter?
Yeah.
You know, was Dad's life not more important than that we can just, you know... It is very tricky. But they were wonderful. They were extremely good. And I was lucky, as I said, with my family. They were great support. Yeah.
Bernie, what you've said there as a wife and as a mother, in many ways you had to set aside your own needs at that point, I would say, because your focus very much went entirely to the family. And has that ever been able to be rectified in the years that followed? Because you had your hopes and your aspirations for life as well, and obviously what you would have hoped to have done with Patrick whenever he would have retired, and when Paddy would have, and you probably had your own aspirations at that stage. That must be very, very difficult also to, when you think.
It was, especially because Paddy did 2 years in the army, 1960 to 62, and then he had 25 years in the Garda. He only had about 4 or 5 years to do when he could have had 30 years service. And now he never said he was looking forward to retirement, but we had great plans for it to be back down to Belturbet and a riverboat and whatever else. And so that was the plan.
So he was intrinsically a border type of man.
Yes.
That he liked.
Yes.
The province of Ulster, he liked being part of that.
Yes, he did, and so that would have been the plan. So of course then, well, everything just absolutely changes then when he was dead. And in the beginning we used to come down very often down to his grave in Drummilly outside of Belturbet, and it's a strange kind of feeling, Kenny. You work up this energy to come down, and then you get to the grave, and you're only there for 10 minutes. You think, why? What am I doing here? And you go back again, and still you want to come back, and grief is very hard to negotiate. It's very difficult, but anyway, as I said, the faith was good, and it kept us. Then I got so annoyed with myself because I started to kind of binge eating, because I was all the time hungry, and I just kept eating, and then I thought, oh my God, Paddy is lying in a grave in Drummondlea, and here am I eating and enjoying food and being happy for a minute. And then I thought, I'll go to Lough. And that was the great. Did you ever hear of Lough?
Yes, I do, surely. Yes.
Did you ever do it?
No, but our friends have done, yeah.
Yeah, so I decided to go. Now, I hadn't done it before, but my sister Phyllis had, and she came with me. And that was an amazing experience. It's tough now. It's very tough. But it seemed
Reconnects
to...
you.
Pardon?
Reconnects you.
It does. It sort of made me feel the desolation in my spirit was connected to the desolation of this place that has nothing, no trees, and just water and coal and hunger and whatever. And I went back a second time the first year. People thought I was mad. But I used to say, well, you know, if I go to Lough, everything else has gone out of my head. I can't think of anything else, only survival. So it was kind of respite in a way. But then I went every year for, I can't remember how many years. I didn't go twice any other year, but I went for maybe 10 years, I can't remember. But eventually it was too much for me. But I
that
did.
brought you a sense of inner peace.
It did. It did, yeah. Oh, it was like that connectedness. And my father had done Lough, and some of my sisters and my brother. And I felt really connected to the past. Paddy had done it as well. Cycled from Belturbet. It used to be a kind of a bit of crack for them, the cycling bit of it anyway. So, yeah, so I did feel connected there, yeah.
So as a couple, Paddy shared that in terms of his very strong Christian faith as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would have been, like, we would have been Sunday Mass, and he wouldn't have been a cross thumper now, and I would have been more involved in the church than he was, but he was genuinely Christian, yeah.
And Bernie, you now have grandchildren, and you know, I suppose look in the world that we're living in now, things are just so unsettled wherever we go, almost any continent of the world. What is it you would want for your grandchildren and for the generation that follows them even, and that you were denied at a point? You know, what would you want for them in the world that they grow up in?
Yeah, it is a very different world. We had a lovely childhood and carefree, really. And for them, well, I suppose to be able to grow up in a peaceful part of the world, in the peaceful world, and that they would be able to follow whatever it is they wanted to do with their lives, and that they would be kind, and that violence wouldn't be in any way, or retribution or any of that it wouldn't be. And I was hoping that they wouldn't be too involved in politics or anything that might stir them to be thinking too deeply. So, and I thank goodness I am very lucky. They've all managed to do what they wanted to do with their lives, and that's a great reward, really, because I used to wonder and worry about how they would fare out in a very different world, like to lose your father in violent circumstances. Like, death is one thing, but a violent death is a whole other dimension.
Absolutely. That another human being could cause.
Pardon?
That another human being could cause that.
Yeah, that's what I used to think. And it was a strange thing, the thoughts I had while I was devastated. And I used to think, well, isn't it good that it wasn't one of mine that would do that to another human being? Because Martin was 20 at the time, you know, Brian was nearly 18. So that level of violence, the awfulness of it, to think, you know, there was a robbery. Paddy chased after them with the others in the patrol car, followed them on foot. There were two of them, up an avenue to a house, and called on them to stop. And one of them turned around and shot him in the groin, and he was bleeding profusely. And he fell to the ground, of course. and they came over and taunted him. I'm at point blank range. They shot him in the head. That was the hardest. The fact that the last face he saw in the world was filled with hatred for me, because we loved him so much. And that's how he died. That was just horrific.